Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to be talking about conditional statements. In TypeScript, conditional statements are used to create logic in your program. So fundamentally, this is how you can tell your program to do one thing under a certain set of conditions or another thing under a different set of conditions. So for instance, you can imagine that you have some application and you have a user in that application. And with a conditional statement, you could say, if the user is logged in, then do this particular action or show them this view, or else if they're not logged in, do this other action. So conditional statements are a very fundamental piece of any programming language. They're really how you allow your program to react differently or take different actions depending on different situations. That could be different state in your program or different conditions that are introduced by user interactions or user input. But fundamentally, conditional statements are how you can tell your program to do different things under different circumstances. So here I'm going to be solving these 4 challenges in the TypeScript module of the pairwise curriculum under the conditional statements section. So these 4 challenges will introduce the basic constructions of conditional statements in TypeScript. And so with that, let's just dive into the first challenge. All right, so here we are. And in this challenge, we have some code in the editor here. And I'm going to just full screen the editor and make it a little bit bigger. So we have this type at the top, which is a fruit type. And the fruit is just an apple or an orange right now. And then we have this function, fruit prices, and this takes a fruit and returns a number. And then inside this function, we have an if statement. We say, if the fruit is an apple, so that if the fruit is triple equals apple, then we want to return the number 1.5. Else, we throw this error and we say unknown fruit received. And then down here, we are calling this function twice, and we're passing in apple and orange, and then we are logging out the results of those 2 function calls. So if I run this code, you will see that I get unknown fruit received, and that is of course because we passed in an orange right here, which although it is a valid fruit, our function now right here is not checking for any oranges. It's only checking for an apple with this if statement right here. And so this if statement does not match the orange that we pass in, and so we end up in this else statement right here, which throws an error, and that error is showing up here in the console, and that's as far as our program gets. So to fix this problem and to solve the challenge, what we want to do is we want to add another if statement in this expression here, and we want to say else if the fruit is an orange instead of an apple, then do this other thing. So we can do that like this. We can say else if the fruit is an orange, then we're going to open up another set of brackets, and then we will have to return some number here. And we can just return, let's say 2. Let's say the oranges are $2. So we'll return 2. And then finally, we can leave our last else statement by just adding it again here, like this. So now if I run the code, you'll see that this passes the tests, and we do see apple price is 1.5 and orange price is 2 over here. And of course, if you called this with some other fruit over here, well, first of all, you'll get a type error because that would not be a fruit defined by this fruit type right here, but that also would eventually throw an error because it's an unknown fruit. Okay, so that's it for this challenge. Now let's move on to the next one. All right, here we are in the next challenge, and I'm going to leave it in this view where we're just looking at the code for now. So here we have a fruits prices object defined here, and then we have, again, a type fruits, which in this case is a key of type of fruit prices. So this is essentially saying that the fruits type can be any of the keys of this object. And then we have a function fruit prices. It's the same function as the previous challenge. And then down here, we are getting the price of an apple. But here, we haven't implemented the fruit prices function at all. We have to implement it ourselves in this challenge. And we want to use an if-else statement again. But this time, we want to check for any of these fruits. And you can see if I pull up the challenge tests that there are a bunch of tests down here we want to be checking for all of these different fruits. And then finally, we also want to throw an error if we get an unexpected fruit. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So what we can do is we can say if the fruit is equal to apple, and I'm just going to fill out the full if-else statement first. Else if fruit is equal to orange, else if fruit is equal to banana, else if fruit is equal to blueberry, else if fruit is equal to strawberry, and then finally we will have our last else statement here, which will handle any other cases. And here we will say throw new error unknown fruit received, and we can just pass in the fruit. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I am just going to select all of these and then say return fruit prices dot that particular fruit. All right, and so that's going to do the same thing for each fruit, and I'll just explain what it's doing for the apple case at the top. It's saying if the fruit is equal to the string apple, then go and get the value at the key apple in the fruit prices and return that price. And it's doing the same for orange, banana, blueberry, and strawberry. And then finally, it's throwing an error if it gets an unknown fruit. Okay, so let's run this code, and we'll see that this passes the tests. All right, that's great, and let's move on to the next challenge. Okay, so here we are again, and it looks like we have our same code from before, and also a lot of tests down here, but there is one new test, which is the solution should use a switch statement. So here we are trying to implement the same type of function, but we're going to use a switch statement. Now, what is a switch statement? A switch statement evaluates an expression matching the expression's value to a case clause, and then executes statements associated with that case, as well as statements in cases that follow the matching case. So this last part is quite important here, and I will touch on that in a moment. And as you can see, we have an example switch statement down here, and we are switching over some expression, and this is also dealing with fruits, it turns out. And then we're saying if the case is, if the particular expression is of case oranges, do this thing. If it's of case mangoes or papayas, do this other thing. And then we have this default case down here. So we want to write a switch statement like this to solve this challenge over here. And we're going to do that in this function body right here. So what we can say is we can say switch on the value of fruit, and then we will say case. And if the particular fruit is an apple, which we can describe by just writing the string apple, then we will do some particular thing here, such as returning the fruit prices of the apple. Okay, and then just like earlier, I'm going to copy this down a few times to make it easier to fill in. And then here we have orange. Here we have banana. Here we have blueberry. And then finally we have strawberry. All right, so if I run this code, we will see that I passed all of the tests except for this one, which is saying we should throw an error if we received an unknown fruit. All right, so the switch statement is basically saying, okay, I want to switch over this particular thing, this particular value that I'm passing in parentheses at the top. And then if it is an apple, I want to do this. If it is an orange, I want to do this other thing, and so on and so forth. Now, when it gets to the bottom, it will be done unless we add a default case, which we did see over here. And so this default case is essentially something, it's like a catch-all that will match anything that falls through to this level. So here we can say throw new error, received unknown fruit, like that. Now this will pass the tests, but there's a few more things we should talk about here. So what's happening is that the fruit is matching one of these cases, and then all of the cases return immediately out of the switch statement and the function that is in the outer scope. So they effectively will return out of the function immediately whenever any of the cases are matched. Now there's something interesting happening, which is that if I instead was to do something like this, if I was to just log out, case, and then let's just do some log messages in these cases. So case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then let's not throw an error here. Let's do console.log default case. Now, if I run the code, and at the bottom here, we are just passing in the string apple. So we're only calling the function once here with an apple. So let's run that code and let's see what happens over here in the console on the right. Oh, and let's not return these prices. Okay, so now what we see is we have case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and the default case, and then we get an undefined apple price. So what's happening here? What's happening is this subtle detail at the end of the sentence. It says, as well as statements in cases that follow the matching case. So what's happening is once this matches right here, it's actually going to execute all of the following cases, whether or not they actually match the particular fruit. So if I moved this down here at the bottom, like that, you will see that we match the apple case, and then we match the default case as well, but we don't match these other cases. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. And it may not be what you actually expect to happen initially. And usually people will be returning out of a switch statement like this, or they will be breaking the statement. They can use the break keyword. So let's see what that would look like. Let's say we have, instead, we can say let price. We can say the price is here, and then instead of returning out of this switch statement, we will just say price is equal to that. We will set the price, and then we will break. So this break keyword, which you can also use in other looping structures, will effectively break out of that particular expression or construction that it's in. So in this case, it will say, okay, I want to break out of the switch statement, and then once you hit this break keyword, it will break out of the switch statement, and then nothing else below that case will execute. So then, of course, we want to return at the very bottom whatever that price was, and this is going to tell us that it's used before it's being assigned. So let's just say by default the price is 0 to make that error go away. And now if we run this, we will see that we hit case 1, and then we do get 2.25 for the price of an apple. So that's working like we want it to, and this is showing another way that you could use a switch statement. In this case, maybe you don't want to return directly out of the function that the switch statement is written in. So you could use a break keyword like this, but in other cases you may want to do that, so then you could just return directly. But it is important to note that particular behavior, which is that the switch statement will match other cases below the matching case unless you break out of the switch statement or return out of it. All right, so having explained that, let's just remove these, and then let's throw our error again so that we can solve the challenge and then move forward to the final challenge here. All right, so here we are in the fourth challenge on the conditional statements section. And here we're going to be writing a very short amount of code to solve this challenge. And we're going to be using a ternary expression. A ternary expression, or this conditional ternary operator, is a very concise and succinct way to write basically an if-else statement. And the syntax can be a little weird. I remember that when I was first learning JavaScript, I was really confused by this ternary syntax, especially because I would see it in code like this, and I would have no clue what it is. And also the ternary word is rather weird. I don't think I've ever heard it or used it outside of this context. So when you would see this kind of syntax, you wouldn't even know how to look up what it is necessarily. So this was quite confusing to me, but actually what it's doing is very simple. It's basically a very shorthand way to write an if-else statement. So we will see that over here in practice. Okay, so this challenge is saying that we have a function get takeaway container, which is returning the takeaway container based on how many fruits the customer purchased. So again, this is very contrived code, but the purpose is to illustrate some of these basic concepts to us. So the function is saying if the customer purchased more than 10 fruits, we want to give them a box. Otherwise, we can just give them a bag. That's fine. And so what we can say is, you could say if number of fruits purchased is greater than 10, then return box. Otherwise, we want to return a bag. And then if I try this function a few times, we'll see that we get first bag for passing in 5, and then we get a box for passing in 50 fruits. So this is working correctly, but the final test is failing, which is checking to see if we're actually using a ternary expression. So this is what we want to represent in the form of a ternary expression. So I'm going to just comment this out. And then the way we can write this with this kind of weird question mark ternary expression is we can just say return number of fruits purchased question mark. Excuse me, the condition is first, number of fruits purchased greater than 10, question mark. And so what this is saying is return if the number of fruits purchased is greater than 10, box. Else, if it's not, bag. So again, what this is saying is if this condition is true, then return or do this thing, else, otherwise, do this other thing here. And that should in fact solve the challenge for us. All right, so that is the ternary expression, which is this very shorthand way of writing an if-else statement. And of course, you could in fact continue to chain other ternary expressions at the end of this, but that might end up being very unreadable code. And so usually you don't want to do that. Usually the ternary expression is ideal for very short if-else statements like this, where otherwise you wouldn't really want to write, let's say, 5 or 6 lines of code potentially, when you could just write a very short thing like this. And also in some situations, it's a little bit inconvenient to have a full, let's say, additional like scope body like this to write a if-else statement in. And so being able to just write an inline if-else expression using the ternary expression is very convenient. Okay, so that is going to wrap it up for this challenge. And that was the 4 challenges in this conditional section of the curriculum here. So hopefully you learned something from this video. And if you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to like the video and please subscribe to the channel. It really helps promote the channel on the YouTube algorithm. And if you liked this kind of challenge, then head over to the Pairwise curriculum and you can try out these challenges for yourself. And as you can see, there are a ton of challenges here, which are all intended to help you learn to code and get a job as a developer. Okay, with that, I will wrap it up and see you in the next video.